So welcome everybody to the XDS webinar series. Thank you all for joining. My name is Chris Wren. I'm the chair for the XDS Advisory Committee, also head of XDI events at Electronic Arts. And I do hope everyone out there is staying safe and healthy as much as possible. I'm very excited, as the previous session that we delivered on this, how to do business development during a pandemic, garnered our highest registration for an XDS webinar and had the most views on our YouTube channel. So no pressure to today's panelists. As this is part two, I'm just going to move straight away into introducing our lovely and talented moderators. Miss Ashley Liu, Service Line Director for Art and Marketing Services at Keywords. Ashley, welcome. And Mr. David Lamb, Senior Producer, External Development at Turn 10, an Xbox Game Studio. And I will let Dave and Ashley introduce the other panelists. And just before that, I'll mention that today's session is mainly focused on Q&A. So we really do rely on you guys as attendees to fuel this discussion. So please, please, please enter your questions in the Q&A feature of Zoom. You can type those in and I will receive those. Or if you're feeling a bit more bold, you can use the raise hand feature if you'd like to pose a question or a comment, and I will take you off mute, and we can do it that way as well. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it along now to Dave and Ashley. Take it away, guys.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Welcome back, everyone. It was quite obvious after the last session that we had a lot more to discuss, and what we decided to bring the entire band back. I'm actually, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through every panelist here. If you do not know or are not familiar with who they are, we actually would like you to go back and watch our first webinar, again, pushing up the number of views on YouTube for us. But the band, so that we put back Geoffroy, Max, Guillaume, Jake, Nanteuil, and David. Our format, like Chris said, will be a little different today. We still have a few questions that we would like to follow up on from last time. We will answer them. We will push the discussion a little deeper so that we can get more out of it. But however, we will start the Q&A session halfway through this hour, really giving everybody in audience a chance to participate. So let's go over to Dave for the first question.
Thanks, Ash. Great intro, and thank you, Chris. So let's jump right into it. So first question of the day, just to kind of warm everyone up. And this is more on the partner side. So have you guys seen publishers' behaviors change over this period? We'd like to be the first one. Max, go for it.
Yeah, I think we have seen behavior change. I'm not sure if I can attest to if it's been mostly on slowing down or mostly on accelerating, because some of our clients, as we touched on during the last webinar, some of our clients have really accelerated their pace to be able to be out of the gate come December for the new platforms. And some of our clients have slowed down because of the nature of their business. We work with VR-based companies. We work with companies that are location-based, and obviously these guys have been impacted a bit more. So I'm not able to say if we've overall had an increase or a decline, but I do know that it's been a little bit of both, at least from our point of view.
Cool. Anyone else kind of seeing any waves of change?
You mean, Dave, in the interaction or approving
Sure, in terms
projects?
Of everything and everything. I would say that from what I would gather in terms of XDS and what I've seen, right, everyone is in different modes of production, right? So whether you're just getting out of, you're in pre-production, then probably not a lot changes, because you're still kind of figuring out what you're trying to make in the game. Maybe it's more, just from my perspective, maybe I'm just trying to solidify who I'm going to be working with, right? So I'm still in exploration phase. There's obviously some big studios that are releasing products very, very soon or this week. I don't want to do advertising, but I mean, they probably at the beginning were just getting that thing out the door, right? So there was probably a bit of a panic there. And then depending, maybe there's some people that have releases that are for this fall, right? That are in the midst of it. And so they're really in the shoot, as it were, in terms of trying to hit some dates, right? So behaviors are going to be all over the place depending on the situation of your partner, right? So
I can probably elaborate on actual collaboration on the project. I feel like through the pandemic situation, the behavior became just more collaborative, and like getting in one room, like Zoom room or whatever Hangouts thing, and hey, we still have a deadline of this date, but now they're within the team are distributed, right? So they having issues with communications and reviews and getting hold of everyone. So I experienced everyone getting in these rooms and being like, hey, this is the deadline. How can we hit it? How can maybe, we take some work on our end? So that would have flowed some work on your end. And you guys wouldn't need a ramp up time here, but you can help us in this area. So in my experience, some scopes even change, like the stages and stuff like that, so that there won't be a bottleneck. And a lot of times when previously it would be like, here's the task, figure it out, Now it's more like, hey, we can support you, help us here. So I feel like in this area, that had been just, more beautiful in my experience. And also, I feel like our partners have been more transparent in sharing their plans and deadlines and scopes and the details. It's becoming, again, in my experience, more of a family style where like, help us figure out how we can ship it, and everyone getting, hands on deck and being involved. But it also takes, in my experience, being proactive and communicating, hey, we can help you guys if you share with us your plans, and we can brainstorm and figure out a solution. So it's sort of like a two-way street here.
Jake mentioned last time about, Virtuous helping clients actually work remote in terms of making that transition. I thought that was really interesting in terms of the added value in terms of where you guys are and how you guys work and kind of bringing people along. That empathy, right? That's what we're talking about now, that works on both sides. Have you found that people are more empathetic to, your situation in terms of how you guys work? And is that why there's more trust and more of an opening up? Because now they see how you guys kind of work in much more of an isolated environment. Do you think that's true?
I think it's helpful. It's always something that we've done. We've formalized the process, I guess, a little bit more than we had previously in terms of distributed online digital training sessions that can last anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months as we're onboarding, depending on complexity and sophistication of the project, tools and techniques that are used, how much is proprietary, how much is off the shelf, kind of a thing. Again, it's something I think I mentioned last time that some of those practices are being cribbed by our partners to help them onboard staff that they're not able to bring on location right now, that they have to onboard and start remotely, especially in areas of design. We've seen a great amount of adoption on that side. It's something that we're circulating proactively to partners that have interest, whether or not we're engaged with them on a specific project or looking to engage with them in the near future. Like, it's kind of an open door policy. If you want to see some best practices, we're happy to share them. We're all kind of in the same boat together. So I think it's more of an acknowledgement of experience than it is specifically an empathetic thing, is that we have been through similar things like this in the past. We've been doing it for 15 years. So it's not new to us in that respect. And so just trying to be kind of a proactive and collaborative member of the community as we all kind of find new methodology to move through and make sure that things don't stall during production windows.
Perfect. Thanks, Jake. Anyone else kind of want to weigh in before we move on?
The only thing I would say
sure.
is that, oh, go ahead, Guillaume.
Yeah, sir. I'll follow up.
All I wanted to say was when you were asking, like, are things speeding up or slowing down from a perspective, from a publisher perspective, my experience has been both. It really depends on what piece we're doing. So there's kind of two things happening. One of them, because we operate a live service game, we're reacting to what our players are doing. So that changes, what our priorities are. But the much more significant factor has been different teams within our company are succeeding to greater or lesser degrees working remotely. And I'd say, like, broadly speaking, we're doing very well, but some pieces of that have been received relatively little disruption or still tracking very, very quickly. And others have seen their timelines pushed back. And so my relationship with our external partners has shifted based on that. So it's sort of like dog wagging the tail, right? Like, our partners are at the far end of this, and they're catching all of the changes that are happening internally for us, whether that's speeding up in some cases, slowing down, or status quo. All of those just ripple out into our external partners. So it's less fast or slow than it is just change and lots of it. And so it's been more about a lot of direct communication, which I think plays into what Nanteuil was saying of just trying to be as open as possible, because the ground is shifting daily beneath our feet.
Cool. Guillaume?
Sure. I was just gonna say that on our end, we've seen both as well. Some slowdown and some accelerated. One common trend we found in both scenario is we found that, generally speaking, the projects in pre-production were, for us, the most affected, because multi-layer approval processes tend to take a lot more time because people are not working together. So when it requires your N+1, N+2, N+3 to greenlight a gate and then move to production, it will inherently take more time during the pandemic because of the work from home and because of the uncertainty. And probably that's just a personal guess, because your game is so far out to be launched, then at this stage, there is no rush. While if you are in production already or close to release, you want to push your game out fast, because it's sad to say, but one of the industries that is benefiting from that is the game industry. Obviously, we've all seen the numbers. So if you're close to deliver, we've seen a lot of pressure on the client side. Hey, we need content, we need content. Even more when games are live service and are already performing. They want to provide content to an audience that is even more than ever playing games. So pre-production tends to be a lot slower for us, but production has been accelerating quite a lot.
Perfect. Thank you. Ashley?
So I want to touch on tools. Zoom aside, we're obviously on Zoom a lot. Is there anything that you found more effective during, especially in the terms of sales and BD during this time? Anybody want to take a first crack at this? Geoffroy, you didn't speak last time, so I'm going to pick on you.
In terms of tools, well, I think, we have the external development is by essence always, remote, right? So in fact, I believe that all of us, we've all tried beforehand all those tools, like the Zoom, there's nothing new to us, and all the distributed thing is not really anything new to us. So, sorry, it took me by surprise.
Apologies.
That's all right. It's not that I have seen or we have seen, I don't believe, any new specific tools. I think the adoption of these tools is definitely a major things that we can see at our clients. I think what you alluded to and what we discussed beforehand was the fact that some of those tools are not necessarily technical tools per se, meaning IT-related tools, but in a situation where the environment evolves, I think we have strategical tools that we can use. And when we talked about that last time, I think I referred to a simple strategic tool, which is called the SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis allows leaders in an operation to, or not just leaders, but anyone in a given situation, to analyze your external environment, the opportunities and the threats presented by the environment, and then the internal strength and weaknesses that your company has. And the idea is to leverage the opportunities by your strength and to diminish the threats by your strength, making sure that your company always adapts to that evolving situation. So I think as far as we're concerned, something that we did very early in the process was to analyze what was changing and what were the key trends that we believed were going to impact on our industry, how we were doing previously, how that was impacted, and how we could potentially replace, say, all those contact points that we used to have at GDCs and so on and so forth. How were we going to replace that and find ways, leveraging the technical tools this time, to in fact change the situation and turn it to our advantage. But it's an ever-evolving situation that requires us to be very agile. And yeah, I think this is what I had to say about that.
So I'm going to dive that into a little deeper. I assume that the SWOT analysis, you only not perform that for OF, but probably your competitors as well, because you're probably also looking at your competitors and seeing how they would perform during this time, and what are some of and how that changes your strategy.
Yeah, competitors are part of the, I would say, the external environment. So as such, they're analyzed, of course. But you know, competition is super healthy. So I think this has an impact on everyone, but a strategy cannot just be driven on competitors. I mean, they're of course a very important part of the equation, but I think first and foremost, it has to be driven by your own internal things. And so at least this is how we view it, in a positive way rather than in an aggressive, threatened way by competition, which in a sense is very healthy in an industry.
Yeah, no, I agreed. Anybody else want to weigh in?
And probably chip in here. Actually, what I've seen a lot happening is, you know, being present on the media. I loved what Blind Squirrel did recently, and I think I think VentureBeat posted about them, of how they're doing their Zoom chats and how they're doing the collaboration between the team, and then making it public so that their client can see what are the processes, what is the communication, what is the vibe, what is the culture within the team. And it's a passive sort of way of promotion. I love what Alexander from Streamland Studios is doing, and making those little pieces and shooting content and posting it on LinkedIn, so that people can be connected with him or whoever without being personally, you know, typing in and chatting on LinkedIn, or having you know, connections in that regard. So I think figuring out what's your content and posting that and being present on social media or whatever other channels, I've seen it being very effective.
Cool. I just wanted to mention, like, one thing that I have seen that's come from the partner side is actually best practice that I saw from Virtuous. And I don't want to give away your mojo there, Jake, but the newsletter that you guys sent out, I think that started out from Geoffroy's time at Virtuous. So, you know, that newsletter really gives people that maybe don't have their thumb on the pulse, like we all do in terms of our industry, and gives them exposure, right? So it's maybe a blessing and a curse in a way, because what I found was, you know, I'd already kind of have my strategy and who I was going to work with, and then you know, the GM will come to me and, hey, I just got this newsletter from Virtuous, we should be using them. And so I'm like, okay, we have to shuffle the deck again. So no, but I mean, it's great. I think that level of transparency and that touch base is really great about showcasing the value proposition of what you guys do. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I mean, the newsletter's evolved a lot over the years. We've been publishing it for probably 7-10 years at this point. And it started off as more of a, hey, look at this thing that released recently that's really cool that we participated in and collaborated on. Is more of a, you know, additional point of kind of promotional exposure. Particularly in the last 2 years, we've really tried to revamp it and retool it such that it's not purely just promotional. It also includes a lot of things along the lines of case studies and interesting, you know, public pieces or expert talks or whatever that we're participating in the industry, because we're spread so many different ways and so many different disciplines and so many different areas of specialty, that trying to consolidate that into one place that's more of a, you know, here's some interesting things that we've been doing over the course of the last 2-3 months, as opposed to just focusing and drilling down on one or two things. And that extends to, when Gilles does an interview about the impact of COVID in China a couple months ago and how we responded to it and things like that. So it's not just about the work, it's also about participation in the industry and places that we're getting involved, and that can extend over to our corporate responsibility program and environmental protection and community service and all that kind of stuff. So.
By the way,
Cool.
I love Virtuous's LinkedIn. I learn about new games coming out from Virtuous's LinkedIn. I'm like, wow, there's a new game. So I use it like a news portal. And actually, Jake, I very much loved your supporting women and like interviews with the women within Virtuos. I found it very beautifully done. Thank you so much for that. So using content and coming up with your voice, what can you communicate to the industry, and what can you contribute to your partners in promoting their games so they can have a better, bigger adoption? I think that is really nicely done by Virtuo's team.
Thank you.
That sort of feeds into one of the other questions we had talked about before about kind of business development activities from the vendor side of what can be doing in this time that is appealing to to publishers, and it's something that I think is relevant to the newsletter, but is not the newsletter specific, which is that it's the ability for publishers and buyers to consume content on their own terms. So one of the things that happens basically at the end of every introductory call that I have with somebody is some version of let's stay in touch, and if there's something interesting and new that you want me to know about, please tell me. And my ability to find interesting new things is driven much more by my free time than it is by how many cold calls I got scheduled this week. So if I'm skating through LinkedIn or my email and I'm seeing something pop up that is like a compelling case study, or it's an interesting piece about what's going on in the industry, or literally just a showcase piece of work, like here's this cool trailer that we did. The ability for me to match my needs to what other people have done, I'm much more likely to then go to them and say, hey, that was a really cool thing that you did, let's talk. As opposed to having people either cold call or cold email in the hopes that I might be looking for the thing that they're doing right now. And so it just, the things like the newsletter, things like finding your voice on LinkedIn, things like just finding the best way to put out there what you're doing in a way that's relatively easy for me as a buyer to find and to use when it's convenient for me, that is super valuable to me.
And to piggyback off that, looking into what Dave is posting on LinkedIn, what is interesting to him, and then finding whether there is something that you're doing that is interesting to him, right? So being present with your clients and what are the things that they're looking for, I think that's very important.
Data science profiles by Nanteuil. Oh my goodness. All I wanted to add to that was just piggybacking off Dave's great information there is, what I look for when I'm looking at portfolios is I can, my artistic background, I'm able to project, right? And so what I'm looking at is, can you solve the similar problem set that our partners have tried to solve in our genre, right? So for example, working at BioWare, right? We're not working, we're working in some sort of realism, but with a mythos and fantasy that's tied into it, that can you come along and tell a story with us, right? In terms of what the BioWare proposition is, to a level of fidelity that is believable within our world, right? So I don't need to see, exactly a mapping of, hey, you did a Space Marine and you did a wizard. I don't need to see that, but can you see that problem, solve that problem set? And then whereas with turn 10 currently, right, ultra realistic realism that you can touch, so the problem set is different. We don't need you to make a jump into a mythos. It's reality, but it's ultra high realistic realism, right? Using latest rendering technologies as a first party. So can you solve that problem set? And I find a lot of people don't really get that in terms of when they're talking about their portfolios and how they can fit into what we're doing.
Yeah, if I may chime in here, I think what you're saying is very important, because I think that one of the first steps that any studio should be doing, is to have a really good understanding of, in fact, their internal capabilities and, basically what they're capable of. And that's the talent pool. And I heard stories from you guys while we were having a, informal chat. Some studios reaching out to AAA studios trying to sell their services, while obviously they were not to the level of AAA, which doesn't mean that those guys are not talented. They would just appeal more to other type of studios. And so I think a first good step is the internal assessment of what we're capable of doing, what we love doing, because then that's going to resonate to the target audience. But the only way to find out a good target audience is to really understand well what we can produce. And then there is a perfect match. And so I believe that's a very important step to do if you want to be successful, because oftentimes we see, okay, we want to work in AAA, but what does it mean to work in AAA? You need to have some very specific sets of artistic abilities, but not just artistic abilities. There's so many things that are important for AAA that if you're maybe a smaller studio starting up, maybe reaching out to mobile studios which don't have such a stringent process, maybe that would be your perfect audience.
Yeah, I mean, as in terms of now more than ever, but I think this has always been true. As a buyer, we're pretty deeply risk averse in terms of expertise. So I am much more likely to take seriously a team that has done it than a team that thinks they can do it, even if they're right. And it's that's not an absolute statement. It's certainly there are teams that we have we've worked with and then we sort of build up, but in a very sort of brass tacks business sense, I'm less interested in paying to train your people than I am for your people to be able to come in and offer expertise that I don't already have. So just thinking about it in a much more kind of mercenary way will actually lead to more honest conversations, right? And that becomes a much more human interaction where, like, if we're all having a direct conversation about what we're trying to do. So in the case of Turn 10, in my former life, we actually did business with Turn 10, and there were aspects of what they did of like that hyper realism that just did not fit the studio. We just didn't have the tools to like make assets for them. That was never going to happen. We didn't have those people, but we did have the people to be able to operate Turn 10's tools. So we actually did do some work for them that way. So it's I think an honest assessment of your team and be able to communicate that in an honest way is going to lead to better results. You're like just having aligned expectations leads to really positive interactions, and misunderstandings lead to really bad feelings.
Great. We're at the halfway mark. Well, we're 2 minutes over the halfway mark. We're actually going to go to the questions that are popping up in our Q&A. The next question actually dovetails really nicely to what Dave was talking about. And it comes from Arjun. And the question is, with GDC off and XDS going digital, what do you feel as our clients are the best practices for meeting and reaching out to you? More cold calls or more emails? What do you want to see and see more of, hear from us? I think, Dave, you touched on that, but I think the other thing that would be really good for this panel as well is how do you best prepare for a virtual XDS?
Are you talking to Dave? Which Dave?
I'm
my question right now, also.
Yeah, I think really for both Daves, but I think also from the panelists is how you're preparing for, I mean, not just XDS, but virtual conferences everywhere.
Sure. Well, I'll take first stab at this. So in terms of, it's hard. So in terms of conferences, I never turn down a meeting unless there's really no obvious fit and I'm really stuck for time. I try to prioritize, who I must have meetings with, but I fill up my calendar every time I go to a conference. And maybe, I find that I'm super tired at the end and it's punishing, but I find that, I'm not only looking for now, I'm looking for the future, right? And so I approach it from trying to be available as a resource, give honest and opinion, and develop a relationship, whether it's going to go anywhere or not. I just feel an obligation to do that, whether I was with Bio or if I'm with Microsoft. So, so in terms of what a cold calling and those sorts of things, that's not an issue. I think people definitely reach out a lot over LinkedIn and through contacts and those sorts of things. I would say that really prepare yourself in terms of what you're trying to achieve and who you're talking to, and it comes back to what Geoffroy is saying, right? Don't waste our time mutually in terms of being unprepared. Know who you're talking to, know the business that they're in. And I always talk about really hard self-assessment about what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And don't say that you can do everything, right? So this is an opportunity for you guys to set foot that first level of trust, right? Even if there's a partner that's not there yet, but they have a good sense of where they are as a company and what their skill sets are and what value they provide and know exactly what we're doing, that really impresses me, of that level of self-awareness. And I'm willing to kind of give some, advice as to where they can work on in order to kind of break the ice and kind of make that first step. But even if there's someone that has an awesome portfolio, as Dave has mentioned, I have a tendency of going to people that are proven with AAA experience and a record that I'm willing to bet on. And if they don't, then we can explore and we can have that conversation and see if there's an opportunity to take that chance, right? And I can't say that happens like super often, but it does happen. And especially depending on if the studio is in expansion of looking to go beyond their current partner set. So we're always looking for those diamonds in the rough, as it were, of the new and up and coming studios that can offer great value, right? And that can walk along that path with us, right? And at BioWare, just another tying into what you guys were talking about in terms of training. At BioWare, we had an understanding with our partners that it was a symbiotic relationship, right? As in, we will invest in training, we will invest in your artists, because we're in this for the long term, right? And we saw, as we went from Dragon Age to Mass Effect to Anthem, I really saw a huge jump in skill set and that symbiosis of what we were able to achieve. We were able to repeat best practices. We were in the same engine. So we were able to build that momentum. So I think maybe I went all over the place with my answer, but I'll leave it to Dave to go next, maybe.
I think that sums it up really well. There's no reason for me to belabor the point. I'd rather answer more questions from people than to repeat what Dave Lamb said. So yes, that more.
Yeah. Ditto. For the panelists, how are you preparing for virtual conferences and virtual GDCs and XDSs?
I think it's going to be interesting to see how what kind of value proposition comes out of these conferences, right? I think for me, it's really about how can you engage with people. If you only have a website and it's, a super simple platform where you can meet with people and it just directs you to a Zoom meeting, like where's the value in that? And our buyer is going to be engaged enough to kind of spend their time and browse that. Because I think if there's one thing that I think sticks from this whole COVID situation and what we've been in versus the old days, like Dave touched on that. Everybody here has been to GDC. Everybody here has been to any big conference. And at the end of the week, on the Friday or the Saturday, you're just totally drained. And I can only imagine that for the buyers, it's even worse, right? So I think one of the big pluses for me is that now we have a full attention span. If you meet someone at GDC, you got 30 minutes. If you've never met them before, there's a big chance that your 30 minutes is spent on introduction and just figuring out if you can even provide the service that they're looking for. That's it. And then you need to follow up. So that becomes kind of a multi-step kind of effort to even get their full attention. At the end of the week, you've been one of 35 meetings, most of which have probably revolved around what you sell as well. So I think that's one of the huge benefits that we're seeing right now is that on Zoom, you got a meeting on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. Well, there's the chance that the client doesn't even have other meetings that date with providers. So you really got their undivided attention. And I think it's going to be really important for any conference trying to set up a virtual version to kind of try to capitalize on that. How they do that is the big question, I think.
Okay, I may have some element of answer about that on how they do, and hopefully Chris is listening. I've seen some very interesting steps taken by other online conferences, some Asian ones. And one thing they did that was very interesting is, as Max said, when you're in a conference, a real conference, you have 3 days. You walk the room, you're out like 15 hours a day, you do 30 meetings a day, you don't even remember who you talk to at the end of the day, you're drained. Because you want to leverage on the short time frame you have to be on site with the same people at the same time. Being digital completely removes that handicap. So one conference did something that I found very smart, is they prepared 3 or 4 days of sessions because you want the audience to be watching at the same time, but then they extended the business matching system for 1 month.
Oh, wow.
And what that does is, I mean, it costs nothing to them to have the platform open for a month, but then it allows everyone, buyers and clients, to schedule whenever they want across that month. Because remember, being digital only means no one is going to be in the same country, and you're going to be juggling with multiple time frames. So instead of doing 20 meetings a day, you're probably going to be capped. We are in Vietnam. We're going to be capped of a 3 hours window, maybe. So it's not going to be like 12 hours of meetings. It's going to be maybe 3 for North American clients, and then we can do some European clients meetings. So there is no need to rush to squeeze all that within 3 days when you can actually span that over a month. And another very interesting thing that they've done, and that I think would be interesting to see at XDS Online, is they imported this business card swapping to kind of mitigate the loss of opportunity meetings. You bump into someone, oh, hey, I don't have time, we don't have a meeting, here's my card, call me back later. How do you do that online? Then you have this option to ping people that you find a directory. You don't necessarily have the time to schedule a call now. You don't necessarily have the need to schedule a call now, but you can have the opportunity to say, hey, here's my virtual card, send me your deck. I'll look at it when I can. And then you can arrange outside of the time frame of the event itself and schedule your own Zoom call or your own Skype call or your own face-to-face meeting 6 months from now, because at least you will have the contact of the person. So I thought that was extremely valuable to have.
Those are great. I think Chris is listening.
Great feedback.
Yeah, and the last thing that we started doing here, and I wish we can import that into conferences, is drink up sessions. You know, you bring 10 people on a Zoom call, you bring your own drinks, your own snacks, you go more casual about it, and then you start talking about different things. And one tool I would encourage you guys to check, and I'm not working for them, I don't have commissions doing that, but it's called Spatial Chat. And that's very interesting. You can have up to 50 people in one room, and it's all mini logos, mini avatar. And you see the photo of the person, and you just drag and drop your own icon towards someone else's icon. And as you get closer, it becomes bigger, and you start hearing what they say, and you can engage casual conversation. It's like you are in a party. So the aim is to replicate a virtual party when if you are at the bar next to someone, you can talk to that person, and then you have a drink, and then you move on to the next person. So by doing that, it's not Zoom-like where only one person talk at a time and you listen and everyone else is quiet. You can just move across the room and have virtual conversation with up to 50 different people. And we are starting to use that. It's super fun. It's working well. The tech is working well. And it really allows taking meetings to a different sort of casual level, a lot more casual level than a formal one-on-one discussion.
I like that a lot. I think that would be interesting to see from maybe XDS, because one of the biggest parts of the conferences is actually bumping into people and being like, hey, you know, and having this like just few minutes and getting to know each other, and maybe not even having a, you know, business conversation, but just, you know, greetings with people. So how do we introduce that, and maybe having some sort of round tables or round Zoom chats where there's like, you know, multiple buyers and multiple vendors, and they have discussions and they have, you know, get to know each other on random topics. And then they can have, after having those little introductions, go to, you know, maybe private Zoom chats and have a deeper discussions with, you know, the people that they encountered through that. I think like how through the conferences do we support first meetings with people, you know, in that casual level? That would be very interesting to see.
Yeah, roundtable can be very easy to implement virtually, and it's by far my favorite part of DICE in Vegas when they do the roundtables. I think that would be extremely valuable to implement on any digital format.
I'm curious to hear. I was just gonna say, I'm curious to hear how you guys feel about like the container. Like, I feel like this is one of those situations where the container can almost be as important as the content in terms of how do you wrap that summit, for example, because we've seen anything from the basic, which is you know, a conference, a speaker with a chat next to it, and people can just talk about what the speaker is doing, all the way to, I don't know if you guys have seen what the game developer Carnival has done, which was basically an executable, like a game that you had to download and go into. So I'm curious to see like, what's the sweet spot between this? Because I feel like if you go too big, it almost detracts from the actual goal, which is to meet people. You know, if you can drive a jet ski and you know, shoot at people, that kind of detracts from the whole experience of meeting. Whereas the first one, where it was just chat, I feel has no real connection between people, and you can just watch that later online. So I'm really curious to hear like what do you guys feel would be the sweet spot in terms of getting like maximum engagement and having people want to be there at the same time as everybody else.
Max, are you asking Chris this, or are you asking the panelists?
I mean, it was more for, yeah, everybody, I guess. I'm really curious about this.
We're just forcing Chris to go off mute. Here he goes.
No, I trust me, guys. I'm furiously taking notes, and I also don't want this to too much derail your webinar. But it's all great ideas, and it's actually all things that we're looking at right now. I mean, we have the glorious benefit of time on our side in that we've got 5 months to figure this out. But that also means that expectations will be extremely high by then, and also people will be extremely Zoom fatigued and virtual conference fatigued. So we have a lot of pressure on ourselves to choose the right technology platforms. Max, as you described it, as a container, you know, how do we facilitate the knowledge sharing, the meetings, those spontaneous human interactions? You know, how do you replicate the live experience and simulate that as best possible in a virtual medium? And it's incredibly challenging, but provides a lot of really cool, innovative, creative opportunities for us to surprise and delight people. So as you guys are talking, I'm working in my Miro board and taking notes that I'll be sharing with the advisory committee, and all the feedback is fantastic. So I really thank you for that.
We are putting a lot of pressure on you, Chris, because XDS is a very valuable tool for a lot of people in this, you know, in this community. So making it work and supporting businesses is something that we're looking for from you. So
we've become our own worst enemy now. I know.
I know. I think if it's just like one little thing, I've seen that some of the platforms choosing to extend, like Guillaume, like you said, for a month, the meet and greet and, you know, meet and right? Systems. The only thing and the challenge that I see was is how do you keep people engaged and remember that you have to go back on this platform? And what I've seen is with those extensions, they actually are posting a lot of content through those platforms and having additional roundtables or sessions and stuff like that, that keeps people coming back to them if they choose to extend that period. Because otherwise, I don't really see myself committing to another new tool that I have to be up to date with for another month when I have already LinkedIn that all my contacts are in. So what is an additional value in that?
Okay. We're gonna pull this question back and go to the Q&A board. We have 3 questions that are there. We have a question from Justin Weber. Working from home presents some challenges around data security, and publishers and developers have chosen to delay external support projects and wait and see how the pandemic plays out. In your opinion, I guess a lot of it will weigh on the 2 Daves here. What's the lesser of the 2 evils, content leaks or loss of revenue from delayed releases?
Loss of revenue. Absolutely. Now that's speaking for as a game. Again, we make a live service game, so content is constantly coming out. There is no game to spoil. There is there's obviously confidential content, but I mean, data mining is a part of our game already. So the producing the content is dramatically more important than the prospect of a leak. I mean, obviously we take data security very seriously, and we do our very best to prevent that from happening, but it's not even a conversation. It's not even close.
Understood. Dave? The other Dave?
Dave answered it perfectly.
Okay. I'm going to go to the next question. Normally, countries that are not on top of the minds of external development like Colombia, Pakistan, sorry, this is from Sebastian Gomez, that etc. do regional conferences and bring potential buyers to position themselves to that top of the list. What do you think of the chances of being able to compete with the traditional hubs like Canada, Singapore, Korea, and etc. in a new environment? So is it a chance for some of the non-traditional hubs to stand out?
Great question.
Maybe I can pick that up because we are in Vietnam, and we were the first outsourcing studio to open in Vietnam back 20 years ago. And it's always been a challenge for us to put Vietnam on the map of the outsourcing business. And when you are an outsourcing manager and you're taking a worldwide trip, you want to go to a country where you can meet 10 or 15 vendors and not one. So taking this extra flight to go and see one potential vendor is challenging, and it's completely understandable. So it takes a lot of time, I would say, Sebastian. And if you happen to be in a country that is supporting the industry, that's a chance. If you're saying that some of these countries are holding regional conferences to bring potential buyers, that's great. Leverage that. My advice to that would be connect with the other industry players and try to grow the industry in your country, not just your company, because you're not going to make a full flight of buyer flight to come and see only one person. That's going to be extremely challenging and difficult to do. So it's either you go to them, and if you want them to come, you need to give them a good reason to come. And to give them a good reason to come, they would need to see potential in the country and in the industry in the country, not just in a single company.
Anybody else have some advice for Sebastian?
I can jump in for a couple notes here. I actually have seen, I don't remember his last name, but Hugo, he promotes Colombian game development, and he literally comes all the time to LA and goes to game dev drink ups and a lot of different shows here, and he promotes the Colombian show. And he personally invites people to visit the country and tells about the development and the studios that are there and the talent that are there. So they have this ambassador. And I've known so much through him about the Colombian game development, which I feel like having that person for a country in general really helps, and having those little conferences like Guillaume said. But I think also a big thing, like going back to what Geoffroy said in the beginning, it's not really about the country where you're from. It's about what is your value proposition? What is your talent? What can you contribute to other people's production? And not like, we have vendors and partners that we work from Paraguay, and I've never worked with anyone from Paraguay before, but they had the specific talent and expertise that we were looking for the project. And only when we were signing the contract, we're like, oh, you guys are from Paraguay. Didn't matter. So I think having your voice, having integrity, and communicating that is more important in that regard.
And yeah, and I wanted to say, I think we were talking about competition and so on and so forth. And I think Guillaume has an interesting point, because he says, it's hard when you're alone in a country. So basically what Guillaume says is, he doesn't feel that he has competition, or at least many competitors, right? So he would wish that, in fact, he had more studios in Vietnam. And so, so the importance of us belonging to an ecosystem, so, joining a trade association, I think is very key. If you look at Scotland, Scotland does an amazing job at promoting its ecosystem. Talk about Germany, they do an amazing job at promoting their lenders. France does a good job as well, to a certain extent. And you can name lots of that. So I think it would be good for any studios in smaller territories to maybe regroup, think about how can you promote and have one person that could represent the country and the interest of all the studios. I think that would be a very good first step for those countries that are maybe not as top of mind.
Unite.
Thank you. Let's squeeze in one last question in.
One last point I wanted to make was just looking at MDEC. So Malaysia does a great job of supporting their game division and digital ecosystem. So if you want to look for best practices, look up XDev and Hasnell. Shout out to Hasnell.
Dave, let's squeeze one more question in here. We've got 4 minutes.
Sure. So from Vlad, do you think post-pandemic biz devs will be back at physical events, shaking hands, exchanging business cards, meeting and mingling as usual? Or do you think there will be a completely different approach to physical events after COVID?
I think that is highly dependent on the ability to travel. My personal impression is that there is a desire for having people physically together. I think that's mostly demonstrated by just how hard we're working with digital tools to emulate physical contact. The ability to meet up with people. I got to say, the prospect of being able to meet people in a scheduled meetings a month out in a controlled way is very exciting, because that is definitely a major weakness in physical conferences. But I will have a hard time imagining we're going to have meaningful conferences or outside just regional conferences if international flights are a thing that are, until that network is restored, it doesn't matter what we want, it's not going to happen.
And I feel like conferences and trade shows are probably the last bastion of this whole fight that we're having, because I think personally, as Dave said, once flights resume, I think flying back to major hubs and going to see clients on site will probably happen first. But if you think about trade shows, if you meet 12, 15 people in a day and you shake their hands, you've probably shook the hand of everybody at that conference at the end of that day. So I think it's probably the last bastion of, when we have a vaccine or, but I sure hope that being able to go visit clients on site will unlock before that.
I certainly hope that even if we project ourselves like 3-4 years down the road, and assuming there is a vaccine and a cure and all of that is behind and international travel is resumed, I do hope we learn some lessons, and I do hope that some of that would be maybe reducing the number of events that are organized, which is overwhelming, frankly. Over 150 game conferences over the world annually. That's a lot of shows to attend. I do see a lot of values in going to events, but maybe rationalizing that into key events, more spread out geographically and across the calendar would make more sense, because we had no choice but explore other ways to do BizDev, which is the reason of this panel. And maybe we'll realize that, I mean, international traveling, when you send a team of 10 and of course, all big events are, you know, always in Vancouver or Tokyo or Paris or San Francisco. It's not exactly cheap cities, right? So when you send a team of 10, flights, accommodation, meals, and all that, the bill is high. The bill is high. So you can afford to do that, especially if you're starting off in the industry and you're on a budget. You need to choose very carefully which event you go to and how you attend this event. So hopefully this all online BizDev period would have allowed more people to make contact with industry partners and find new ways to connect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Guillaume. I think we're out of time, I believe. We were hit right 10 out right at the button here. So I want to thank all our panelists for returning for the second time and bringing some great perspective to the conversation. I wanted to thank Ashley for partnering up, being a great partner, and for Chris for giving us all this opportunity to get together and share with the community. So, and thank you for everyone for attending and supporting us and asking some really great questions. I look forward to chatting with each of you for whatever incarnation XDS will be. XDS Adapt.
XDS Adapt,
Thanks,
I like that.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
David.
everyone.
Ashley.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.